And then in 2001, my daughter was born, and that started to kind of change and shift my mindset a little bit. I still had the tech experience and was still making really good money, but I wanted to do something that was going to be a little bit more impactful. And so that transition was finally able to take place in 2006 when I went to my first startup, and we did a great job. We grew it from about 5 or 6 employees to about, I think, 28 or 30 employees before I left that and fully went independent on my own as a full-blown consultant, and really building sales team and sales strategies from that experience that I had at Lockheed Martin and then the startup I was with.
What more can you tell us about that business? Like, tell us a little bit about what type of work that was, and how did you get from 5 up to 20 employees?
That's a great question. So really the idea was that business was to provide disaster communications for a private cellular network for FEMA and National Guard, and to render aid in disaster zones much more quickly by being able to take an individual that would normally have their cell phone in a normal workday environment and go right into the disaster zone with no transition time. So it was seamless for them. And so what really happened is when I was at Lockheed Martin, I started to do some solutions architect work. And this particular startup hired me to do solutions architect, but I kind of knew I wanted to do some sales. And so the VP of sales there really took me under his wing and taught me about sales strategy, sales planning, did a lot of mentorship, and I just realized that that's where I wanted to be. My niche was how to grow companies and strategize from a sales perspective what they needed. And it was a great experience because I met a lot of different consultants because we were backed by a billionaire Irishman. And so I got to see a lot of different pieces of consulting, and it helped me formulate my business model, and then kind of taught me going forward working with some of my clients what a good consultant looked like, why they needed a consultant, when was an appropriate time of consultant, what type of consultant they needed. And so that just kind of continued throughout the years, just trying to figure out, what advice we needed and what was appropriate for that stage in the business.
How did you get involved in that business to start?
Well, when I was at that startup, I got involved with Peak Venture Group at the time. Now they're Peak Startup is the name of the nonprofit. And it became readily apparent that these skills I had as consulting, putting together their sales plan and understanding how to grow the companies, that was needed across the board. There was a serious need. People don't really understand sales strategy or sales planning. So I saw a need in the market for that sales strategy, sales planning, and I had the opportunity to sit on various different boards for different startups and get to know a lot of different consultants. Had some big wins, really big failures, and really learned a lot. And what I've been able to do is, as I've gone through this process and advised for different startups, and I still volunteer actually for Peak Startup, is what kind of consulting do we need? And even big companies, successful companies like the company I'm with now, there's different areas of expertise that we need to bring into the table, and what that looks like, and what's the appropriate amount to spend on a consultant, and where is a consultant useful? Because I think so many times businesses, and I saw this a lot in the startups I was with, they would go out and hire a bunch of consultants and blow their capital. Maybe they had a $250,000, $500,000, $1 million in capital, but they blow it all in consultants, and they didn't really understand how to efficiently use that money. And so really, one of the goals I do, and one of the things I work with a lot of the clients I work with and a lot of my volunteer time, is helping people understand what's appropriate for their particular business stage or business cycle, because everybody needs consulting. Just like a college football team or an NFL football team, a baseball, they need a coach, but you need a certain type of coach for certain type of things. Like, you don't have an offensive coach on an NFL team coaching the defense. You have a defensive coach, and you have a quarterbacks coach on the offense. You have the quarterbacks coach coaching the running backs. And so it's just like that in business. There's going to be times when you need a quarterbacks coach or a running backs coach, or just these different types of areas of expertise, whether it's sales, tax, health insurance, marketing, because marketing and sales are two different things. A lot of people think, I'll go out and hire some sales guys. Well, sales guys aren't necessarily really the greatest marketers or really understand marketing. You need a social media and a digital strategy along with, regular boots on the ground marketing and sales strategy. Those are different areas of expertise. So it's really understanding from a business owner's perspective what you need.
So the picture that I'm getting is that you worked in businesses and you saw them misappropriating their funds on consultants. And now you have become were you a consultant at that time?
Yes, and not necessarily misappropriating funds. I mean, I think they had the best of intentions and really wanted to grow their business, had a great idea. They just didn't know exactly what they needed. And I think that's where a good organization like an SBDC, the SBA, SCORE is really good. But even what I really highly recommend before you hire a consultant and is go out and look at some mentors in your industry, whether you're in IT, like you could talk to some of the guys over at Navicai, a very successful IT firm here in town. They're very accessible. Say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this IT concept or growing this app. What are some of the challenges you face? So seeking a really good mentor to advise you on the different steps or phases on when you might need a consultant or what you might need a consultant for, and getting some advice from people who kind of been there, done that. I'd highly recommend that before you just go out and say, I'm going to go hire this great sales guy that knows sales strategy. Say, well, do I need a sales strategist at this point? Or maybe I actually need to work with some patent attorneys at this point, and that's a better use of my funds. So seeking a mentor that's been there, done that in the business world, or going to an organization like Peak Startup, I think is a great way to start, because then they're gonna help you.
So talk to us in a little bit more detail about how the work that you do now is solving some of those problems that you found at that time.
The work I do now, what the experience has brought me forward is this kind of a really unique case with this particular client in accelerated business. And it's really actually interesting. That relationship continues to bloom and blossom, and I really love where I work. And there's a chance that it might turn into a lifelong career. I like it that much. But it's a very unique case because they had an established, successful business model in the retirement planning realm, and they're growing leaps and bounds. Actually, they're doing a lot of M&A work. They're probably going to acquire some other finance and retirement firms. They're doing that well. But what they had is they had in-house business services that they were offering to clients, and they already had the trust and rapport because they're already dealing with their retirement incomes. I mean, think about it. What more trust can you do when you're going to trust them with your life and your retirement money? And so they were really good at saying, okay, well, why don't you try this tax strategy, or why don't you try this health insurance strategy? And people are like, yeah, we trust you. You're already a trusted advisor, right? And so really the idea was to bring me in and really the first kind of guy that was going to be the boots on the ground, was going to figure out the marketing message. One of the things I highly believe in from a sales strategy standpoint is CRM. You gotta have CRM because there's so much in the pipeline and so much you've got to, and it helps really enrich the customer relationship. Thank you cards, gifts, little, it doesn't have to be big things, but a gift card to the local coffee shop and things of that nature. CRM. Is a sales process. Most companies, most businesses don't even have a sales process. So coming in, writing the sales process, and the cool thing that was unique about this case is I'm used to that kind of that start bootstrap thing where you have no funding and you have to get creative. This, I had tons of funding because they're a well-financed company. So I had resources, which was kind of a unique situation in the beginning. There had some pitfalls because since I wasn't used to having resources, I didn't necessarily use my resources correctly. So I learned some things early on, and then I was able to reformulate the strategy and have been a better steward of those resources in the last 12 months. But those first 6 months were a little bit like I wasn't really quite sure to do. Now I have all this money, and so it taught me some things, and I had to kind of go back to the playbook and some of the lessons that I had learned working with some of the startups and some of those things in the past. So.